Dr. Jones, you look absolutely sporting.
Man,
I'm not sure what to call that.
I love it.
Coral. I think.
salmon.
Salmon?
Maybe,
I love
coral,
it.
maybe coral.
That's awesome.
I probably would.
I'm jealous.
Going to the polo club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, should we get started, or should we wait for Paul, or were we gonna?
Right, well, I think with, honestly, all the discussion on oil and gas, I feel like we should probably get going and make sure we
Okay,
get enough
that's what I was
discussion.
thinking. Okay, so we are going to get started on the town board work session for September 23rd. Goal of the work session is to have the town board receive information on topics of town business. And so the first item that we are coming back to is the MS4 permit process and the fee discussion. Here, so Janine, you gonna lead that off?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. We have already, we first visited this in last month, in August, and I was asked to come back with a more, a list of options for the different activities that Safe Built could undertake for us, which I did do that. We have, first of all, are there any questions? Has anyone looked through this and do you have any questions on any of the options?
What's the main difference between 2 and 3?
Between 2 and 3, that means that they would be doing the plan reviews, and Safe Built would be doing the plan reviews for MS4 compliance for us. And they would,
In 4, they would be doing the reviews.
yes.
How many, or
Option
how
three.
many is that up to just a certain, or that's for each one they do per lot, it says?
Well, the requirement on the builder is to turn in a typical plot plan, and if they have any deviations, like a hillside overlay or anything like that, then they would send that in as well. But typically, we just see the same type of standard lot plot plan, and that's what's required for them to send in.
How long does a review normally take if we do that internally?
If we do that, doesn't usually take terribly long, but it's the communication back and forth, getting all the right documents. That's the,
I'm just trying to,
challenge.
there's only a difference of $40. I'm
Right.
trying to see, like, normally we can do that in-house for half an hour,
Exactly.
but that, is it,
Yeah,
or not, or does it, or what the, is it worth it to us to keep that on, or is it worth that $40?
well,
To have somebody else in
Yeah.
charge?
yeah, there's plan review, there's the communications back and forth to refine the plan, to, there's so many variables, Mayor. It's kind of hard to put an exact time stamp on how long a review is gonna take.
But you could,
But
on average.
Average,
yeah.
probably half an hour, I would say.
But how many are there?
Again, there's the continuity with the building.
That's what I'm
They're
thinking, like a
doing
one-stop
everything.
shop,
Yeah.
if they do it all.
Mhm. Exactly, that was my thinking.
Following Maz's question. Well, for purpose of this, the definition of lot means a single-family home.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
So if a developer comes in with 100,
Mhm.
they do each one separately. Each lot.
They permit the entire area that they are gonna be disturbing. So
Okay.
all of those lots would be included in their permit, and all of those lots would be inspected by myself or by Safe Built.
Each individual lot. So if there's 100,
It's taken in aggregate, so.
Yeah, they look at it in
We're
its
looking at
totality.
Right,
Okay.
the permit,
Okay.
I'm not gonna look at, from lot line to lot
Okay.
line, no.
So they're 160 per lot or 200 per lot.
Uh-huh,
Right.
That's the
Right.
entire aggregate, not each individual.
well, if they had 100 lots, it
Okay.
would be $200,000 for
Okay.
that.
Okay, that's what I
for that
thought. I
area.
just wanted to
Or
clear up.
at 200 lot, it'd be
to
20,000.
20,000, sorry.
Right, that's right, okay, it's per lot,
Yes, right.
not the aggregate.
The charge is per
Permit
lot.
is aggregate.
The permit is an aggregate and the charge is per lot.
So, back to the mayor's question about how much time. The permit is by the aggregate, not each individual lot.
But the inspection is each individual one.
Well,
The
it's
charge.
the exterior mostly of
Okay.
the aggregate of the lots. If there's separate lots, you know, if they're within a quarter mile of each other, then you're gonna be looking at each of those lots. And
Okay.
that's, you know,
Okay,
almost as time consuming as looking at a larger area of connected lots, because you're looking at more surface area, if you will, more perimeter area.
But if you have 20 homes in this one lot, we're built a lot or we're built 20 times?
Well, that,
Or
or
single-family lots.
Well, usually, typically, we would see a single-family home on a single lot, typically. If, you know, if they wanna do an accessory dwelling unit or something like that, that's a separate issue from this. That would be something else I don't think Safe Built would be probably doing, because it wouldn't hit the, size requirements.
Right, yeah, so I don't think that's a likely scenario. It would be, I think we could say for every lot, we're gonna have one home on that. If there were an accessory dwelling unit, I think it would just be, in that case, it would just be one permit or one, as far as the erosion control was concerned, it would just be one we'd be concerned with. But
Right.
I don't think there's any scenario where there'd be 20 on one lot, this applies here.
The only
I don't
thing,
think our regs would
that
allow
would be a
that.
multifamily residence, and that would fall under the GESCP permit.
Okay, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get
So
the
they would be
definition of
doing
lot.
multifamily, or they would?
Yeah, I'll be on those, so.
Now, Safe Built, if we go to Safe Built, they will assume all liability as far as if they were challenged, if the state challenged them, or someone challenged them, is it their responsibility to?
There would be some responsibility for Safe Built, but the basic ultimate responsibility would be on the town of Windsor. So, because we are the MS4 permit holder. So, now, that being said, if the state were to come out and inspect that individual builder, we don't have any responsibility in that audit at all.
No exposure, you
No
mean, or
exposure.
responsibility?
So if I can restate, so as it comes to as inspections are done, that would be Safe Built would be taking that on, the actual inspections themselves. So if the state audited and said, look, this isn't being done right, that would really be on Safe Built.
Builder.
Or, well, the builder Safe Built, depending on where it went, but the overall program itself is still our MS4. So if somebody said, geez, you can't make me put up wattles, I shouldn't have to do that, that's really on the town.
Yeah, the enforcement would have to come through us. Safe Built would, if Safe Built had a very recalcitrant builder who wasn't going to play the game, then that would be something that I would enact enforcement on. That would not be something that Safe Built would be doing. But the ultimate responsibility for what happens in the MS4 is on the town. So, now, but just let me make the distinction that should the state come out and inspect a builder, they are not inspecting the MS4. They're inspecting what the builder is doing. Okay, so they know that we have oversight on them, but they know that we cannot hold their hand 24/7. So they come out and they are getting a snapshot in time. Safe Built or myself, we're inspecting them every 2 weeks. So we're doing our due diligence in the eyes of the state.
Dr. Jones, and actually Ken, you were kind of hitting on this too, but my guess, and this will be ultimately up to Ian, but, you know, Safe Built is acting as an agent of the town. The town has ultimate responsibility for MS4 compliance inspection. Somewhere, whether it'll be the discussion of we're hiring Safe Built. If you're negligent or grossly negligent in doing what we ask you to do, potentially they'd be responsible for that screw up.
Yes.
But usually highly negotiated in an agency contract is often for the agent to say, I'm acting on your behalf and I want full indemnification. I want to be released if I screw up. There'll be a push on what the contract will say as to who owns the malfeasance. And that will be either gross negligence, simple negligence, willful misconduct, and bounce around. So I don't think we can say today who would bear responsibility for something bad that Safe Built would do while they're acting on our behalf. But that's only fair in a way, right? If our own employees went out and did something bad, we'd be responsible for that. I guess, based on this year, do you happen to know, I don't remember, I know we've done a ton of permits. Do you know how many single-family lots we reviewed and permitted this year?
Plats that they're.
Single-family lots.
Like 650?
Yeah, we're close to 700. They're on pace for.
So at option 3, let's see, 700, add 2 zeros, 14, 140,000? Yeah.
Not every
Well,
one of
and-
those would fall into the single lot
Right.
classification because not every lot is an acre or more in size. And not every builder is building multiples at the same time to where it exceeds an acre.
Just doing that. That's
Whoa,
great.
whoa,
That's
So
whoa. Now we went back to defining lot. You asked the question.
Well,
It's
no, it
every
said-
single-family house has a
No.
lot.
The MS4 permit though, like the builders aren't required to do that unless they're developing over an acre. So normally that would be, like 4 lots, 5 lots. So most of the builders in Windsor and most of these, it is going to apply. But there are times when builders come in and they just do 1 or 2 lots. It's not an acre and they don't actually have to,
So 600 instead of 700?
well, I think it's
And
probably
then-
like
and then-
675 for.
Yes.
Another percentage of that number could be also the commercial developments that, other building projects that are not single-family lot building projects. They get issued building permits as well.
So option
Is that
2
right?
gets us probably 90% of the way, sounds like, because option 3 is the final piece.
Mhm.
So that would alleviate a lot of workload off.
Yes.
I'm wondering if maybe we ought to retain, though, that final piece, if that's the final inspection piece that has some folks maybe concerned or worried, like what would happen there. And this, at least we could try it that way, because I think what we're trying to do is accommodate a couple of different things, figure out a little bit more efficient system with what we are working with right now, because we're not always gonna be seeing 700 permits come through.
And we get reimbursed by the builders,
And the builders pay this fee
They do.
to the town of Windsor,
Correct.
and
And
then
we-
Safe Build invoices us for those.
I think that's one of the benefits to having the $200 option though, is that if you get a downturn in the building and stuff, we don't have employees or extra time being spent on those permits.
Right.
Safe Built absorbs that and we're not having somebody either if we hired somebody else.
But I'm hoping we don't even have to do that with option 2, though, because if they've taken away 90% of what her job is, that should alleviate the time for what we need to maybe accomplish.
If we, throw this out, if we went with option 2 and we find that it's taken more time than we thought, we would have the option, wouldn't we, to go back to Safe Built and say, rewrite the contract?
Well, what we're initially talking about is a 1-year contract with 1-year options after that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
But I'm sure they'd be flexible. We've had a very long-standing, we have a great relationship with Safe Build. If we found 6 months into that, or even 3 months, I'm sure they would be more than amenable to us coming in to renegotiate a contract.
We said we want.
I don't think they would want us to decrease if they gear it up to
We
do
wanted
a
to
certain
spend more
level.
money, they
As long as we
probably
are
would.
willing to do more,
Right.
I'm sure they would,
Right.
could,
Right.
yeah, accommodate.
I think I'd support option 3 because it just seems like a single source for the people to go to, where we're not divvying up, trying to get up to speed on certain ones. It just seems like it'd be easier to let one person handle all of it.
Fewer handoffs, yeah, I agree. Fewer handoffs,
Yeah.
just cradle, I like the cradle to the grave idea.
No, I would agree with both of them. I think builders would be willing to pay for it for the expedited nature of it. Developers and builders have
I don't
talked
think this is
about.
gonna expedite anything.
Well, it may very well do that if, we're still taking in the, the piece of paper that says they want that. But I shoot that over to Safe Build and they take it from there. And that's, unless there's a compliance issue that needs some kind of enforcement applied to it, I won't be dealing with it.
So under options,
It'll be one-stop shopping, like you said, for the builder to go from there,
so option 2, you send it to them, they do, and then they send it back to you for the review and some of these other things.
Correct, well, I would, complete all that upfront business and then forward it to Safe Build, and then they would start in on the inspections only. They would be doing inspections only.
Right.
Whereas with option 3, they have some, knowledge of who the builder is, what they're doing. They can do their homework, if you will, before they even go out and do an
Well,
inspection.
and they're already out there.
And they're already out there anyway, so they have the relationships with the builders as well.
One clarification, Janine.
Yes?
Where it says with option 3 that only the safe built permit technicians would process the permits?
Well, that was an anticipation,
Okay.
but that's all.
Because they're only in town hall 2 days a week, so the other 3 days of the week, it would be our in-house staff taking those in. So we would have to look at that.
Okay.
But those would be in conjunction with the building permit, right?
Right,
So
right.
it's really not,
It's not really an interruption to the workflow,
Sure.
so.
Yeah, they would just accept the paper on the application at the same time they're taking the building application and forward it over to us along with all the building applications anyways.
It's Caleb from Safe Build.
If we do option 2, because MS4 is relatively new to us and we're now just seeing the volume, is there a staffing implication if, with respect to the permit intake processing and stuff, that you would retain in-house?
Sir, I don't think there would be a staffing issue so much as an efficiency issue for both the town and for the builder. Because that, taking care of those issues is a time thing. I'm finding that to complete an inspection, an average inspection on a GSCP permit from start to finish is a minimum of an hour. So if I have 4 inspections, that's 1 day. That's a half a day gone, 4 inspections.
But that would be work that would be done
So-
by Safe Build under option 2.
Mhm.
But the intake and the processing
Mhm.
task would be done in-house.
Right.
And at 675 or 700 or some number per year, are we currently staffed to handle that process? Or would we, in 6 months, be saying, oh my gosh, we need another person to do that because we've done with option 2?
I guess, not to get into budget discussion, but we're actually requesting a backup permit technician in this year's budget because Robin has been overloaded.
yeah, but we're talking about two different things. So I think as it applies to MS4, right? That's really the question. For the building permit, that's a different thing. I don't think that this program should impact Robin or her office either way. It's gonna impact Janine or it's gonna impact Safe. So, I'll tell you that, there was a request this year to bring on some help, for MS4, for the 2020 budget. I think it's partially this program and partially just all the other things we have to do for MS4. I've actually asked Janine, to come back to give the board a real 30,000-foot view of this is where we are, this is where we're required to be on this date certain, and all the work that needs to happen, because it is, this is new to all of us, right? But there's a lot of work that the council has to do on MS4. This is just one piece, one thing that we're doing. So the short answer to your question, yeah, I think that there are staffing implications. I don't think that it's gonna be driven, we're gonna need another person just based on this decision, but I think that Janine is gonna need more help for the program, and depending on what we do with this with Safe Build, could that drive the need for that extra help sooner? I think it could. I don't think it's gonna be we need one person just for this, but I think that just the totality of work that we need to accomplish in a fairly defined timeframe is gonna,
Well, is there possibility in the future to outsource even more of that stuff, go to an outside source rather than in-house? I mean, if we get Safe Build involved at this level, why wouldn't we maybe continue to think about or outsourcing whatever other things that we're gonna have to comply with, because they're gonna get introduced to what's required here. I mean, I think that might be something we would wanna look at, rather than maybe perhaps down the road.
and Janine, would you, because for me, the other stuff is like, we have these, detention ponds we need to go and look at. The nice merit here with Safe Built is they're already on site, they're already going to each one of these houses. So, even though they've added a staff person, we thought they could probably pretty efficiently take on this program with the work they're currently doing. These other like retention ponds, I just don't know that it translates for them. But I think it's a good question to say, is there somebody else, some other outside source that we contract with? What would that be? And is there a way to just outsource all of it?
Was there any outreach to any of the developers? Because what are they being charged? Are they being charged anything for this currently?
Not yet.
And have they been told that this is coming, and what was
Just in
the?
a, straw poll, dropping
Response.
it in casual conversation, it's been about 50-50. Ooh, that's a lot, or, man, we pay that elsewhere. So, I don't have any statistically proven responses concerning their reactions.
The difference between option 2 and option 3, I'm sorry, I gotta keep going back to this. Obviously, there's some additional work that would be handed off to Safe Build under option 3. If we don't hand that off to Safe Build, it's gotta be done in-house. The price difference, 160 to 200, is $40. If we process 675 permits, that's $27,000 that we'd be paying them additional. That seems to me far lower than having a staff person.
Right. Well,
Even half.
and that for those would be collected, so the town wouldn't be paying that at all. I think that's
That's right, the development community would be paying for all of this versus
Yeah.
No-
Is this an
It's a good
incremental
point,
increase
No, I
on?
get your point, yeah.
Very good point.
Well, and as the market cools too, it's an outsourced thing. We're not having to go, now we got too many people in MS4 department, now
In light of,
Do we still need a town manager?
that's a whole nother work session.
Yeah, it's in the charter.
He's gonna be leaving for a few days.
I was
We can't outsource it.
I was leaning toward option 2. $40 isn't gonna break the bank, our homeowners' price of a home, but anybody can keep costs down, it was good. But also, you remind me that there's a lot more to MS4 coming, and so I'm leaning now toward option 3.
Well, and I
Is this
They also mentioned
I
that
wanna,
they're already on site, so
Yes.
the efficiency factor.
it's there.
But if we also look at this from the development community's
Yeah.
point of view, they look at this as another governmental, imposed,
Right.
requirement that they are going, what do we have to pay to get this hurdle in the, permitting process out of the way? And, it may sting a little bit, but at the same token, I think that they've already got a relationship with Safe Build, from all of the, all the other requirements they have to deal with in the permitting process. I don't know why, to make this, is painless on staff, as well as it being a component that Safe Built can do, why we wouldn't wanna.
I think it's the
Go that route.
lowest fee, it's just about the lowest fee that builders have to pay, close to it. It's not the $200 is not a large.
But it's an incremental fee over today's, whatever
Well,
permit fee they.
we're not collecting anything right now for this. But you're saying over all the other fees.
Right, when you add it all up, today they pay X dollars, or were they all going to be paying X plus 200,
Right.
right?
I also
I think
want
200 plus.
I want to clarify that,
Which I've heard it's almost $100,000 before they even,
Right,
all,
right, it's-
everything. That's why homes are so expensive.
Yes.
but I want to clarify too, that since May 6th, when the ordinance went into effect and I began taking in these permits, I now am up to 10. So the builders are submitting large, chunks of lots that they want to, so how many lots there are within those 10 permits? I don't have that information right on the top of my head, but, so it's, I guess it's permitting and then quantity inside the permits that changes from permit to permit.
This pricing is the same as what we saw previously?
Yeah.
Because wasn't that something we were gonna try to maybe negotiate with them?
Well,
Was
yeah,
this the
the
best
board
price that we
asked,
can get from them,
is it-
considering we have this relationship already with
Yeah,
them?
I think the two options before were 40 or 200, and the board asked if there's something in between. And then there's also a question, because if there's for the reinspection, and I think somebody said, well, geez, if you don't have a reinspection, is that fee waived? And I think the answer we got is.
Yeah, that was the $40, that was
Yeah.
corrections.
Very.
Yeah, it's very infrequent that there's not
Possible.
something coming back, and I think for Safe Build standpoint, it's like, now here's our fee. So, and again, Caleb is here to.
Caleb, you wanna negotiate? You wanna go up to the table?
Is your council present?
No, we,
Ours is.
our business development manager would be actually working the contract, but we had the rough, estimates that they come up with on the pricing, so that's what we're presented to go off of. as
So
far as
is there
actual
room
contract.
for more negotiation then?
Is the
have to
recorder
ask.
running?
If you don't ask, you don't get.
Don't go back to the office.
I mean, as we finalize the numbers,
You answer that
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
as we massage the numbers here, then.
I could ask them to take another look at it, this is what we came up with, just looking at the number of trips, the amount of time involved and everything, that's what they'd come up with on the numbers. I don't think
So,
it'd be
and that's a savings that the town will see if I am not going out in a town vehicle, burning town fuel, to do these inspections.
Well, I think it's more on the long-term staffing needs internally.
And-
That the more we're burning you up, the quicker we're gonna need to get you help, and then that comes in a big crunch. And I would also say right now, whatever time she's spending and whatever we're spending for time, there's no reimbursement coming in for that right now. This is just something that we're doing. What's nice about this fee and having it be a pass-through is it takes both the burden off our lap and we're not paying that cost. So I do think there's a real staffing savings here, I really do.
I guess I feel, I'm joining everybody else, I think option 3 makes the most sense, but I would only want to add to that on the staffing model when you come back with this particular function, or even really all the permitting function. Probably, I'm going to look pretty hard to see, there's some administrative part here that hopefully is being absorbed by Safe Build, which should slow down at least the addition of a head.
The addition of an,
Of additional staff.
yes, yeah.
Right, right.
I mean, I think that's the trade-off here if we do
Yeah,
Right,
this.
for outsourcing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's an insignificant number. I mean, we're not paying for it, but at the same time, there is I think a reason why we're going down that path. And maybe in the future, if we get them introduced this way, that's what I was thinking, there may be additional things in the future we can look to contract rather than handle that as an internal employee situation as well.
Okay, or if we've kind of got consensus on this, just because I know we want to talk about the air quality monitoring program.
Yes, I
Yeah,
think so.
okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So our next item is the air quality monitoring discussion, and it looks like Scott is going to lead that discussion for us this evening. Or not.
Thanks, Gail. We can all gather around that screen.
Yeah.
We can-
So we use some chairs.
And did you get my email?
I did, and we've added a couple slides for that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, at the end of at the very end, we've got some
Okay,
slides that came from a Broomfield report to kind of show what they're testing for and what they're finding, and it's very early right now, but they do have a second report out to compare to their first. So, so staff looked at 3 primary examples of air quality programs that other jurisdictions are using. We looked at Broomfield, Garfield County, and Longmont. Broomfield is the most transparent and the one that they have everything on the website, and it's pretty easy to find all of their dates and what they went through to get to this point. So starting with Broomfield, back in 2016 is when they started working on their operator agreements. They had a moratorium and they decided to put together a task force and update their comprehensive plan to address oil and gas. And in 2018, they approved an agreement with Ajax Analytics, CSU, and they're also working with CDPHE and the National Center for Atmospheric Research with their air quality monitoring program. They issued an RFP, they received 8 proposals, and they went with CSU and Ajax Analytics. And later on, we'll discuss, we actually met with the professor from CSU that is the coordinator of that project. He couldn't be here tonight, but is interested in Windsor's discussion. So they are budgeting, or they did budget about 1.2 million for the initial setup in the first year of their program. They're paying for this out of Broomfield's 2018 public health operating budget. Their contract with Ajax and CSU is for the ongoing
Scott,
testing.
do you happen to know the revenue source for that public health operating budget?
I don't.
Yeah, because they're city and county, they get, yeah, they have a health department and have other state monies that come into that.
Okay.
So this is taken from their website. I believe they have 19 locations that they're testing air currently. CSU and Ajax Analytics put these SUMA canisters out in the field to collect weekly air samples. Those canisters then are sent back to CSU for analyzing the air samples that they brought in. They set up 19 locations, 3 around each oil and gas pad, and then a few that are just general locations within Broomfield. So they're currently doing this. They're also working with on some other studies that weren't readily available yet. And then this air monitoring mobile lab, that's the CDPHE lab that we requested to come to Windsor, but it requires a power source that we couldn't get at the locations that we were considering. So the Garfield County example, they've been discussing this for a long time. It started back in 2005, and actually one of our planning commissioners, Doug Dennison, was an integral member of the team that put this program together in the early stages. But they're studying the air quality from Glenwood to Parachute, and they also, the Board of County Commissioners are contributing $1 million toward a study that CSU conducted. I don't have a copy of that study. I haven't been able to.
You know where the gap came? So they contributed $1 million to a 1.77 million.
No, the CSU came up from his, I think CSU picked up the rest of it. It was like a joint academic study.
Okay.
So then, from 2012, they studied air emissions from natural gas drilling and well completion. It's a comprehensive assessment of air toxics, ozone. It's pretty self-explanatory. the Longmont example was the hardest to find any information on, but I did finally get the staff memos, and the information that I received indicated that they have a testing station at Union Reservoir and one on the west side of the city, and they're following up on city sustainability goals. They contracted with a doctor out of Boulder, and their study is estimated to cost about $400,000, and then an additional $150,000 for the West Longmont site, and then another $50,000 for some building enclosures. So their overall cost in Longmont is approximately $600,000. So just to summarize the three programs, they've all been working on them. Garfield County the longest, but everybody's been working on them for the last few years. And I guess the expenditure ranges from about $600,000 to over $1 million for the initial setup and first year of monitoring.
Well, that Garfield County, that was multi-year, right?
But yeah, that, for the study, it was multi-year, yeah.
Is the study different from the actual then testing and calculating and monitoring?
Yeah, according to Doug, they kind of begged, borrowed, and stole every piece of equipment that they could. There was some excess equipment that they got from the CDPHE back in the early stages, and they kind of, they kind of cobbled it together to begin with. And now if you go to the Garfield County website, they do have live testing sites, 2 or 3 in the county, so.
But is all of that function covered by the 1 million? Or is
No, I think that's
just the study.
That's just the study.
And I think it's similar to the city and county of Broomfield. Garfield County has their own health department and other resources for the ongoing testing. So after we met with the professor from CSU that was involved he was involved in both Garfield County and in Broomfield. If you've seen any of the...
And it's Jeff Collette, Professor Collette.
Right. If you've seen any of the news pieces about the Broomfield project, they're the group that have the mobile, it's like an SUV with testing equipment all over it, and they do some mobile testing as well as the 19 canisters around Broomfield. And so he didn't recommend that we use the RFP that Broomfield used, but all of these did go to an RFP process to design their programs and establish, how often they're going to test and what they're going to test for and how they're going to analyze their data. So we would probably, if the town board decides to go in this direction, we would probably need to put together an RFP to design the program. According to Professor Collette, we could probably do something maybe a little bit scaled back from the Broomfield program with the use of, I don't know a number, but after they would do some initial mobile testing to determine the best locations around town to do testing. Then we could work with CSU possibly, or another laboratory, to strategically locate some of these SUMA canisters, probably in and around oil and gas pads, or maybe a couple that aren't, some are just looking for ambient air quality.
Yeah, a couple of neighborhoods around
Right.
the city, especially with prevailing
Well,
winds.
did you check back in with Great Western and Susan, I can't remember how to pronounce her last name? Because, they already have the plan, Great Western does, to bring this to all of their future sites. They're doing an experiment. I think it was in Adams County, and I think right now that first one went into place. But they already plan to do this.
With this similar type
Well, they're gonna have some kind of monitoring at all of their future locations. I don't know, can't remember I don't know who they were what and they were gonna end up using, but it was an outside third-party source, you know, that they, that when we had met with them, they were, I think, investigating, trying to figure out, you know, like, who they were gonna go with, what was the best one, and I think there's a site in Adams County that was gonna be like their test market site, and I think I did see something not too long ago that they have implemented that now, so they probably don't have any data yet, because I think it just probably went into effect. But that's something I think that we need to keep in mind, because they already plan to do this.
Right.
I mean, at all their future, that's what they told us when they came and presented. And I just did, but they still were, they were still on that path, right, where they were trying to figure out what that really looked like, and, but I think they got it at least to the point where they're doing a test. So they must have found whoever they picked, at least for this first go round, in Adams County.
Okay. Yeah, I can follow up with Great Western to see what type of technology they're using.
Well, and I think that's kind of what I remember, the other part of it, Mayor, is that they're really, you know, a lot of these, this technology is so new with a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And again, after talking to Professor Collette, what I like about something like a SUMA canister is it's not.
Pretty readily available.
Yeah, it's readily available. You know, these are you know, pressurized. They open it up and they know this will fill up in 1 week. I mean, it picks all the ambient air. It's not, you know, it's not effective if you just have a prevailing wind for 15 minutes and pick up a false read or blow stuff away. So these are pretty inexpensive to get into. They're reliable, and we can have them tested at CSU. So I think these are all things that would be good. The negative is if you know, Paul says, hey, look, had a constituent say that they smell something in the air. These are really, I guess, somebody could go out there and just open it up. But it's not really like a real-time sensor that picks things up. This is over the long haul. So,
Because it's measuring what, parts per billion or something, or something, is it, are they like a vacuum? Are they sucking in the air, is basically how they work then?
Yeah, and about the longest time frame, he said that you could set them to collect air is about 2 weeks. And so you can take them out if you have a complaint and fill it up right then and there, or you can set the control to be a 2-week sample and then send it into the lab.
So what's nice is over time, we would know really good data on Windsor. We would know if there's any kind of issue, what's really going in the air. This would give us that data. And what I also like about it is if we did a protocol like this for a couple of years, when we monitored and we thought, geez, we really have an issue here, we need to focus more on this area, or there really isn't an issue here. I think after a couple of years of doing this, we
Well,
would know.
but that was my question to all of this. What are these entities finding? Because all we saw was price tags, and that doesn't mean anything unless we know what the quality of the end result is out of, after they've gone through all this, what did they get? And how did they use it?
Sure. So all three of the, especially Broomfield and Longmont, are so early in the phases of their testing that they really don't have a lot of data built up yet. But Broomfield did release their first report earlier this year in April, and then just a few weeks ago they had their quarter number 2 report. So they do have a comparison between earlier this year and just second.
And Scott and I talked about printing these out, but they're like 60 pages.
Yeah, I can send a
We
link.
thought, we could send you a link, we just didn't want to, you know, talk about the environment and still pre-treat what we're doing.
Right. So, you know, they're, according to the Q2 report, they measure over 65 air quality metrics with their 19 air quality stations, which are those SUMA canisters. They had highlights in their report that indicate they're testing for benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. They found some elevated levels near the oil and gas sites, and associated some of those with some odor complaints. But so they're testing for volatile organic compounds, and they've got a table here.
Yeah, but on both, that slide and the slide before, both of them were well below
Yeah,
the health criteria levels.
yeah, I was just looking for that. the very last. There's a statement.
You might not have pulled that up. It was pretty early in the report when it talked about that, Scott.
Okay. Well, I thought I did. But
And
yeah.
I'm trying to look back here, when did they start theirs? Broomfield?
The first report I thought was April this
April
year.
of this year.
So they had them into place before that time, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
That's the
quarterly
first
A month
report,
before,
so
so
I
maybe, or
think
maybe
you-
January,
Right.
and then they had the first report in April.
That's right.
Go back one slide, Scott.
Yeah.
Bottom bullet, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, the most important finding was that the air toxic concentrations remained well below standard health guidelines. That is what I was looking for.
That was just one quarter.
Right, right.
I mean,
And they also,
who knows how much activity was during that quarter or.
Well, and they talk about in the report about like, when you have, when it's winter time, depending on the air pressure and storm systems, that you may have different results. It can be the same, the same operator in the same site, and depending on what's going on atmospherically. And
Right.
so these are all measured, they get wind and weather, and there's
Yeah.
other data they bring in, so they can really quantify it and say, yeah, this was produced here. They said they could also, if somebody went by with a diesel truck and just
Yeah.
idled next to one of these, they'd be able to pick that up in the lab. They would
Well,
know.
like that second bullet right there,
Yeah.
all those VOCs decreased from quarter one to quarter two because seasonally.
yeah, during the summertime, it's hotter and you don't have the thermal inversions that you have in the wintertime. So,
How do they compare to us, like, the amount of oil and gas activity within our, do we have a higher concentration, or do they? That's kind of,
I can't say
Kind of a
a
hard
higher
question.
concentration, but I think overall volume, we probably have more oil and gas wells in and around Windsor. But they're testing, they put 3 test sites right around the oil and gas pad. So if we did something similar,
Yeah,
you would,
be
you would
equivalent.
think it would be fairly similar.
And that's part of the reason why I really like the idea of going through an RFP, because I don't think we can design this at this table, right? I mean, this is really about, at what point do we say, we need outside help, we need somebody who does this to help us with this program.
I was gonna make a point, I had a good conversation with Apex, because they do some of it in Longmont and Broomfield. And, the surface, I think it's told this to Shane, on the surface it seems pretty simple, right? But there's a lot of decisions you need to make up front. And those, they were measuring, Broomfield were measuring 65 metrics or something. I don't know what all that meant, but there's decisions about what stage of the operations do you want to measure. And I would say continuous. Also, what is it you're measuring for, and getting patterns. So I agree, we would need some experts to sit down on this design stage and really talk about what it is we're trying to identify over what period of time. And I found the representative for Apex was very helpful in talking about, here's the questions you need to think about before they could ever even come up with an RFP. So I think there's experts out there, whether it's a professor or in the industry itself, or, Apex or companies like that, to maybe.
Because there was a new company
list of,
at the
here's
Energy
questions we
Summit
need to
too,
think about,
who's thinks they have the,
yeah.
like the latest and greatest. I think they're out of California.
Yeah.
They're just trying to, they're not in this market yet, but they're trying to get into
Yeah.
this market.
but Apex is not Longmont though. They're
Broomfield,
Broomfield.
yeah.
Longmont is
But they were really
Detlef
good.
Helmick, who also does the
Yeah.
Boulder
But
Reservoir
the
stuff.
point was, they were very helpful in just a phone conversation. Here's the type of questions you need to think about. There's quite a bit.
And Professor Collette was very
Yeah.
helpful,
Yeah.
and I think he would be able to help the conversation.
So what do they do on their end? So they do the actual testing?
Yeah, they would take the canisters after they're full over their 2-week or whatever time frame, take them into the lab and test for the, I'm assuming similar 65 air quality metrics, and then they clean the canister and put it back out there for the next.
And so who's doing this? Is this a department? These aren't,
Yeah, I
these
can't-
aren't students? I mean,
Well,
like,
it's
I mean,
the-
what are?
The collection is really, it can be anybody. I mean, it wouldn't need to be a PhD to drop them out. I think the testing itself is done in the laboratory, so it would be.
So they
professors and
have
graduate
something
students.
already kind of set up that they're, I mean, whatever however they run through this process, whether it's the machines or the equipment or whatever is set up that they know.
Yeah, they have,
Yeah.
They do.
yeah, they're doing that for Broomfield right now.
I like the idea of an RFP because I think, you know, there are the Longmont solution, the Broomfield solutions, there's various solutions out there. I was pleased to see on the canisters because I was kind of worried about, and it is a little bit still a snapshot in time versus continuous, like Longmont's doing continuous readings. And so if we do an RFP, we can look at those options, because like you said, we're not gonna make that decision here.
Right.
And see which one is the
Right.
best option for what we can afford.
And the, one thing again, talked to Professor Collette, he said that he had a couple of former students that like, you know, kind of work for the industry now, and they did say a lot of these little, you know, mobile labs and things are just really, the technology's just isn't there yet. You get a lot of false positives on things, and so I would be, I'm just don't hesitant to really make a big, you know, $1 million investment on something that's not really proven.
Yep.
And so that's kind of it, but you're right, because we also have the option of third mobile lab. If we have an issue, just bringing the mobile lab out and seeing how much that would be. And I would say the other things that CSU could do, or what I think we'd want the RFP, we want somebody to test. I think we also want somebody to help us set protocols, so we know, you know, if we have a higher level of benzene, what does that mean? Do we contact the operator and say, hey, look, what's going on here? Do we call CDPHE and say, we've got grave concerns with these? And so I think if they could help us set up the protocol so we would know. And again, I'm trying to come up to a point of, could we do a program where we contracted, not bring on any professional air quality staff, you know, can we just run this through our own resources? And if so, I think if we could have them set up, they do the testing for us and they let us know not only what we need to test for, but at what point help us with our protocols, then we would know, hey, look, we get this report, it's in context for staff. We just have to call, you know, the operator and say, hey, this is an issue, or we call the state, or we can work through the protocols without necessarily being air quality experts on it.
Shane, I'd like to see these at some point on our GIS website, where people can go back and actually look at the results of each well, as we build up the history of these.
Well, I think we could put them on, and depending on where they are, yeah, I think we could say.
Link back as well.
Right.
Link back to the lab, I don't know.
Did these other ones that we don't have this information yet, because they're, I mean, do they indicate where and what they're going, how they're going to release or provide their data? I mean, is it gonna be, do they have like a website, do they have it somewhere where they intend to release their information and
Yeah,
reports?
Broomfield's got the most comprehensive website, and this stuff at the end is all pulled from their quarterly reports. So they've just got their first 2 quarterly reports online. Longmont, it's so early in the process that they don't have any data yet to share. In Garfield County, you can go to their website and see what the readings are at the 2 or 3 stations that they have.
Yeah, and so that study.
Because they're the oldest one.
They are.
So how come we don't have
Well, they did a
any good
study and-
information from them?
We just can't seem to put our hands on it there. We just haven't seen it, so I don't know if because it was a study, have you got it?
It's not been published.
Okay.
He's written it, and it's out there, but it's not actually been accepted in any journal. He has not been published.
Okay.
So actually, at the
he hasn't
Energy
done
Summit,
So there's no peer review at all on any of his work in Garfield.
I met and spoke with one of the commissioners there, and I have her card, so maybe I'll call her and see if she can help
Garfield
us.
County's gotta be, aren't they one of the number 2 compared to Weld County in total well production and stuff?
Yeah.
Long history too.
Yeah.
Goes back years.
Is Parachute in that area part of Garfield County? I don't,
Yeah,
it's
Rifle.
Rifle.
So I'll contact her and see if
Okay.
she can, if anybody who might be involved in it, I would think that the commissioners would be,
It's got
and
Rifle.
I would think they
Right.
would have access to that.
Glenwood's in Garfield.
I can't imagine.
I think this has
Proprietary.
tremendous value for a lot of reasons for our community.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a lot of it's out through Parachute. and all that.
That was in the details, a lot of detail to flesh out before we get to an RFP, but 2 questions I have. One is early warning. This is measuring over a period of 1 to 2 weeks. If there was an emergency or a release of some emission, is there a way to have an early warning system? I mean, there could be daily fluctuations, I know that, below the state limits, but if there is a problem, I don't want to rely on the industry to be the ones to tell us about it.
Sure.
So that would be one question. Second question gets into the law. Could we, or would we want, this is a question we'd have to think about, do we want to have a fee charged to the industry to pay for this? Or at least pay part of it?
And I would say with the second, what my approach or what my suggestion would be for the board is, let's figure out the program you'd like to do. And as far as really doing the RFP, seeing what those costs would be. And then at that point, I think staff can make suggestions of how we could approach that. You know, the easiest way would say, you know, this program will cost $100,000 a year, and we have 100 wells, active wells, and so each active well pays $1,000. You know, I'm saying just did town manager math there. I don't know what it would be. You know, that'd be the easy.
Fee or sewer fee. Or
that would be I think the easiest
right.
approach is to just take whatever the program is going to be, and then see if there's a price per well, or if the board said, you know, we want to split the cost with the industry or whatever. Obviously, that would be in your bailiwick, but I think we can talk about fee, but it just seems so premature to talk about it until we know the cost of the program.
Gotcha.
I had a question. We're talking about all these, but we didn't talk about Dr. Detlef Helmig's, what he's doing at Boulder Reservoir. It seems like that is probably the most robust solution that's out there potentially. And then I know some of us have gone to his presentations. I saw two, one this year and one back in 2018 when he was presented at Front Range Community College. And you know, he does the real-time sampling. It's all available online to the CDPHE and everybody else. And then he also does like a reverse forecast where they look at where the wind patterns are so they can kind of tell what direction the air is coming from. And so they do kind of some innovative things. And I guess if we do an RFP, he is also doing Longmont. I guess one of the sites went online 2 weeks ago. Another one's going to be coming online soon. But that's what I like about the RFP is we can get the CSU folks as well as the CU folks and anybody in the industry that wanted to bid on it. I was surprised when I saw your presentation about 8 people bid on Broomfield, for example. That was more than I expected.
Right.
And so I think, you know, going that route will give us the, you know, the best possible folks out there, and also, you know, help us determine what we can do and the cost and so on.
Does Broomfield still have a moratorium?
No,
So they're letting them drill and they're just
that was,
watching and see what's going on?
yeah, that was to give them time to update their comprehensive plan and to create this program.
Well, and I'm kind of like Shane, this is jumping way ahead, is, you know, what do we do if we have, you know, we've got a monitor sitting in a neighborhood in the middle of town, and all of a sudden you get a high levels of this or that. And, I mean, what do you do? Look at all the wells surrounding us. And you go out to one and they say, well, it must be the one on the other side of town, or this or that. Do we have to go out and stick monitors on half a dozen of them, or anything in the proximity? How do you determine who's doing the most polluting? I think
I asked that
I
question.
mean, we don't want it to continue, but on the other hand, how do you detect where it's coming from
You have
and
monitors in
what
each
you do
well.
about it?
You have these cameras
Well,
in
but-
each well.
I also think that we shouldn't be alarmists either, because at the last MPO meeting, when we had somebody from RAC present to us, actually the sources of VOC emissions, there's a 75% reduction from oil and gas
Yeah.
in reductions. When they just released this study, it just came out in
Reduction
2017.
from what
From the
they had
parts per
before?
million, from all of what's being emitted. So so people are doing, I mean, there are improvements being done. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be cognizant and thinking about other things that we need to put into place. But, and 25% of what they call NOx emissions too was decreased. So the air quality and all of those sources, those are, I mean, these are reports we're continuously getting from the Regional Air Quality Commission and the Colorado Department of Health as well. And they all say the same thing, that we are making improvements overall.
And that's one thing I struggle with, because when I saw Dr. Helmig's presentation, he presented that same data saying the emissions are going down per well, but due to the sheer number increase in wells, our overall quality is not. And that's one thing we need to figure out.
But there's a difference there between what he's saying and what the Regional Air Quality Commission is saying. Because they're taking into account overall. They're not just saying this is just one area or the other.
Regarding Dr. Jones's question, I asked that of the air monitoring company I was talking to about, can you tell me if there's a elevated emission, is it coming from 50 miles away? Is it coming from this well? Is it coming from my house? What? And they said, yes, you can do that.
Yeah,
The
that's gonna
details
be
of it, I don't
important.
know how extensive that is, but I think that's a really important question. And when I talked to the Longmont people, item 2, if they're on the established protocols, I asked them, what are you doing with the data? And the 2 people I talked to weren't certain what they were going to do with that. So I mean, that's a big question for us is,
Right.
okay, if you get this information, says there's.
Well, I would say, we
where's it
don't
coming from?
start this
And
RFP process and go down this path and go get this if we don't know what at the end result
Right.
we
What are we
intend
gonna
to
do with the
do
data?
or have done
Right,
with it.
exactly.
That makes no sense
Right.
whatsoever.
It
I
doesn't
think
help
all
us
that is
if it's
part of
coming
the
in from
overall
Kansas,
plan.
You know.
That's true.
Right.
Did, you just said something, I was gonna see if this other group, when you were talking to Longmont, giving you some information.
Every once in a while, we're in shift.
Cal.
If you smell really,
Cal's.
it's probably Kansas.
The professor too.
I guess I'd like to at least make this statement, and you all know what I'm gonna say,
Right.
because it just hasn't changed. We know with 181, there's a complete rule change, a complete change in environment at the state. COGCC is gonna develop all kinds of new regulations, so is the Air Quality Commission. We don't have any idea what they're gonna do. For all we know, the state Air Quality Control Commission could mandate that everybody who's drilling has to have a monitor 24/7 on site. If they mandate that, then why would we rush ahead now and issue an RFP and spend money on anything till we see what the state Air Quality Control Commission is going to determine? I think they're going to be very aggressive, and it won't surprise me for them to impose significant requirements on the industry. Now, I know you don't want the industry to report the fox watching the hen house, but if these are neutral equipment.
Right, third party.
Right.
Right.
Then, and so until we know that,
Yeah.
until we know what the state's gonna do, I feel like this is premature.
Why not get ahead of it?
Why spend taxpayer money on something you may not need?
We have data though,
Or
that
something
will
that's
help
gonna
them
be
make
duplicated.
decisions if we can provide
But
data.
if they
That's
mandate
my
it
bill.
2 years from now, we've got a year ahead of them.
What about getting the CSU prof in here, just to talk, before we go RFP, just talk to us about, you know, the strengths of testing, maybe the weaknesses of testing, what we might, you know, what we might be dealing with before, just a general conversation.
Well, and maybe
Q&A.
even not just him, but maybe him and, I don't know, there's might be a couple of other
Maybe
folks
from
we
the industry,
could.
maybe from Great Western, but I would like, I mean, I'm strongly in favor of doing something, but I don't have clear in my head what exactly we want to measure. I mean, there's
That's right.
30 or 40 different things you can measure. Maybe don't need to do this, so I need to hear some expert
Right,
opinion on what is it we want to measure.
right. And so that was back to my, so does this equipment, as far as you know, back to what one of you said, can it pick up if it comes from like, I mean, does it have that capabilities when they bring,
Well,
where
what
if it's
is-
an outside source?
Right.
Well, what it's paired with is they also would do this with the weather station. And so the SUMA canister is just gonna have
Okay.
whatever VODs, whatever it picks up. But the person analyzing that would take that with that, if you have the weather data as well, and say, well, yeah, there are sustained 50-mile-per-hour winds.
Okay.
And that's.
Because I think that would be important, that we have to have something that can distinguish if it's something else. I mean, I think they said that about the mobile unit, that it can, like if it's cars going by, you know, they can distinguish between just, if it's some kind of emissions from the vehicles that are coming by versus
Well,
something
and they
on
can-
site
They
versus.
can definitely, he said that they can definitely factor that in, so they would know, because when, with vehicle combustion, there's things that happen in engines combustion that don't happen in oil and gas well, so
Right.
that they can, even though benzene is a byproduct of both, that they can factor out the engine.
Yeah,
Dr. Helmick said the same thing, that he could differentiate oil and gas emissions from automobile emissions.
yeah, it's almost a process of elimination with the 65 things, you know, they can tell where it's coming from or what the source is by eliminating some of the other stuff that they're testing.
So you get the data and it suggests that, I mean, you can even identify, oh, our data suggests it came from that well. And so you go to that well operator and say, what?
Can you fix it?
You allowed excess fumes? And they say, no, we didn't. They say, oh, yeah, we did. We got it right here, we got this data. Well, our data doesn't show that. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Okay, let's go to court. And now we gotta hire an expert testimony against their expert testimony to show that the emissions came from that well, because he's gonna say, no, it didn't, it came from this well. For all I know, it came from, I think this is a rat's nest, and I think the state is best to address this.
And we only have control over what's in town.
Yeah.
And we're totally surrounded by county oil wells.
Right.
We have no jurisdiction
Right.
to do anything about it.
So
Well,
I,
and that would bring up the air quality testing that you've always talked about, the MPO gets their report, is that from the CDPHE that?
it's from the regional air, well, there's two. There's the Regional Air Quality Council, and then there is the then there's the Air Quality Council, which is overseen under the governor too. These folks are an independent kind of group, outside group.
And I would say, at least, even if there's no recourse, I'm not sure there's no recourse, at least we can notify the public, this is what's happening in town. We're elected for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And if we can at least give them the information, even if we don't go to a lawsuit or some extreme that might happen, if we can at least let the public know.
That's why I think having our
Or what
protocols-
isn't in the air, so
Or
that
what
once
isn't.
and for all, it maybe settles the issue.
Well, and that's where I like Dr. Jones' comment about having an expert come in and actually talk to us about pros and cons. Is this the best way to measure? You know, is this?
I think that would be the
reliable? Is
next
it-
thing, is we need
Yeah.
to, I don't think we're rushing to do an RFP anytime soon. I think we need to do another meeting, as Dr. Jones suggested, and get some
I'll
folks.
tell you, when
around the table.
Scott and Ian and I met with Professor Collette, he made this simpler, you know, I
Yes.
mean, he was able to kind of simplify it, and, I think, there's not a lot of technical aspects, but I think at least when we look at the program
Yeah.
and talking about how you can set it up, it made me feel better, like, okay, he simplified it, so I think, yeah, getting, I would think having him come in, I think he mentioned that lady from
Right.
Great Western.
And, to your point, David, isn't November a timeframe when COVA's supposed to come back with some first?
July.
Their first
Or-
set of regulations was flow line.
Helmick,
Is
It was
for when?
flow line.
I have his,
Yeah.
But really, all of this will be addressed by the Air Quality Commission, and they're doing their separate set, and they've not published a timetable.
Oh, I thought
It
we're
was July
supposed to see
2020.
some stuff come in November.
I knew that at CML, the head guy of of COGCC that was there, and I thought he said within the next 18 months, they had to have it all laid out, so. Which would be by the end of next year, basically.
COGCC is different from the Air Quality Commission.
Right,
You guys are
right,
own set.
right.
And this is where this issue will get addressed out of that.
I agree with you, though, I think they are gonna be hard on the industry.
Right.
And that's what all the signs have pointed to so far.
we don't know.
Well, so maybe by the time too, there will be some rulings though come out that will give us some ideas and direction as well, because I thought this fall there was something supposed to
Yeah, there's
initially come out.
There's a whole schedule of all of
Yeah.
the different rulemakings that they're having on the website. This fall is the first ones.
Yeah,
I think this has been a good start, and I appreciate the work that
yeah,
the staff have done. in this so
I do
far.
too.
Sure, okay, yeah, absolutely, and I just wanna let the board know, because one of the things that came up, I think that, Ms. Szyslowski said a couple times, you know, geez, if the state has these scientists, you know, and we get our own scientists, it's either we're saying our scientists are smarter than the state, they agree, so they're redundant, or, you know, why would we do that? But I think, like we heard from the COGCC and CDPHE when they presented to the board is, the state hasn't increased funding for any more of their staff.
Right.
And so they're getting pretty at capacity. So I did reach out to CML last week to start the conversation to say, what steps can the town take? What can we do to at least see if these folks are planning on asking for more staff? How can we advocate for that? Because again, if we're, to the extent that we're gonna rely on the state to help us out, and if we think we have an emergency, we contact the state. I mean, last time we did that, we contacted on Friday, and I think an inspector showed up on Monday or Tuesday. So that's clearly not, I think, what anybody has in mind. If we think that we have an actual emergency, you know, showing up 5 days later that, I don't know, help us with the body cleanup. I don't know what they're gonna do if we have a real emergency.
I think there's a
So-
difference between the technology around monitoring and detection versus enforcement and oversight.
Uh-huh.
And I would agree, I think what we will get is a very extensive, sophisticated set of rules and regs coming out of the State House. At the same time, they'll probably say, but we don't have enough staff to really go around and actually check and whether they're complying.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, now if we want to think about having our own compliance person to go and monitor and make sure they're complying with the state rules, that's a different question than whether we should redundantly do our own monitoring when the state's already required.
And I understand your argument there. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that these agencies are staffed appropriately. And so I've just started that conversation through CML and seeing if we can, you know, because to the extent that these state agencies can staff up better, I think they'll be able to support all of Colorado.
Well, like what Longmont said this several months ago, but they said, we're gonna measure the air, and if it's bad, we're gonna go to the CD, PHE, and whoever else and say, look at these results, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Since ultimately, you know, they carry a lot of the burden. But without the data, there's not a whole lot we can do at all, so I think we're moving in the right direction.
Okay.
Just like Christie said, it maybe it's not as bad as some people think, yeah.
That's a hope.
I think that'd be a good thing
You always
about.
say it's below state requirements, we're gonna be on. That's what we want.
Well, that's what the findings so
Yes,
far
that's
today
what
have
we
been.
want.
Well, and are they gonna change the state requirements?
They've been,
But it's in
One
there.
super recommendations
That
on
would,
good all weather identification, would be in this board.
Sure. Yeah, so yeah, let's do it.
Just because I have to,
Well, we just do staff updates.
I was doing that meeting.
Yeah.
so I
We presented the same information to
Right.
town board.
somewhere, I don't know.